just wanted to make a comment about discussion about, we usually hear the freedom is, you know, the liberty of speech and the liberty of money, but of course the United States is based on what liberty and justice for all, and often we forget about the justice part. So in terms of the, you know, just saying, well, we should be able to figure it out, so we'll let corporations and billionaires spend as much as we can, and then people will just somehow sit and winnow, and we'll trust the people. Well, the reason they spend billions of dollars on advertising is because advertising works, and you can trick people into doing things that they shouldn't do. And the reason we have justice with the democracy is to say, if somebody is selling, you know, candy that is actually heroin, we can say that's not just a liberty issue. We can say we can make a democratic rule to say to outlaw that. And it's the same thing here, where if the Constitution starts with we the people, the democratic justice should be able to say we're going to try and protect we the people and use those, you know, forms of justice to say no, it's not just liberty of speech. It's not just billionaires can come in and spend as much money as they want. So I reject the idea that it's just a matter of liberty because you agree with justice.
Can I take that? No. Well, I just point out that, first of all, I agree with you to some extent. I'm more afraid of the regulators than I am the people, to be honest about it. People get control of those levers. You know, the old Labour government in England, they wanted to control the commanding types of the economy, steel, coal, electricity, things like that. They were thinking small, control speech, not at all. That's what we're having here. Look, Meg Whitman spent the 2010 governor's race in California. She lost the most expensive non-presidential race in United States history. She spent over $160 million to $40 million through Jerry Brown. You know, money doesn't always win.
The fact that it doesn't guarantee it doesn't mean you ignore it.
Okay.
Well, let me just jump in here for a second. A couple quick corrections. The Austin decision in 1990, McCain-Feingold, didn't ban corporate speech. What it simply said is that if you want to participate in an election, that you will have to do what candidates have to do, and that is that you use a regulated source of money, and that the donors of that money should be disclosed for all the public so that they know who's trying to influence their vote. And then what Citizens United did was they said, well, no, you can't stop corporations. It was a 5-4 decision. They said, no, corporations, unions can use unlimited money out of their general treasuries to influence the outcome of the election. But what Citizens United also said in the same decision, it's called a side decision, and the vote was 8-1, is that now that we're allowing all this money to flow into our elections, you damn well better pass disclosure laws in your states and at the federal level so that the people of Wisconsin and of the United States knows who's trying to influence their election. That's the battle we're fighting right now, and we're not even able to get simple disclosure, let alone get the cat back in the bag with regard to unlimited money. It's going to take a while for that second thing, by the way, a long time. But at the very least, what we could do tomorrow is have disclosure. That was always the fallback of people who oppose campaign finance reform. We don't want public financing, just have automatic disclosure. Now many of those people are against even disclosure of those donors.
There's a couple others who want to comment. Go ahead, Professor, and then Senator.
We're spending a lot of time talking about money's effect on elections, and that's very important. But in some ways, what's equally important and more important is those same campaign donations' effect on the behavior and the roll call votes of elected officials during their term in office. And, you know, with the 2-year term in Congress, you're always running for office, you're always raising the money, so that's something that's coming in all the time. And studies have been a little mixed, trying to find correlations between the votes received, the money received and the votes, and that's for a couple of reasons. One is you can never really isolate what your political ideology is, who you took money from. You can say, hey, I was going to vote that way anyway. But the real effect of money, and this is a point I want to make, is well before the vote. The vote is the tailpipe emissions of the process. That's at the very, very end how you vote, and we may or may not be able to draw a connection between your vote. But what's really important is what gets paid attention to and what doesn't. What gets formed into legislation and what doesn't. Whose phone calls get returned and whose doesn't. Who has access to the legislature. Who is involved in the drafting of legislation and who isn't. What's on the agenda is the most important thing, and that's never figured. We're always, political scientists are always studying the roll call votes. And I'd say that's maybe the least important part of the process.
Senator Schultz wanted to say something before we go to another question.
Sure. Let me just make a couple observations. One is general and the other is quite factual. I'm old enough to remember when, in this state, we had 10 congressional representatives. I think there are many people in the room who remember that. In those days, out of the 10, 9 of the districts were competitive. And both political parties put up candidates, and that's very different to what we have right now. We now have 8 congressional representatives because of our relative loss of population compared to other states, and none of them are competitive. Is it any wonder that people, when asked about participation in the process, say it doesn't matter? Well, they're right, because a group of people got together in a room and deprived them of that right by cracking and packing, as was pointed out here. I think that's wrong. Now, with respect to money and speech, I think we accepted a long time ago in this country that there are limitations to speech. The famous example is you can't yell fire in a theater. It's sort of common sense, right? I happen to agree with Mike Blaska that there ought to be room in the public square for corporations to have a voice. And perhaps we have not allowed that in the past. I strongly believe that there ought to be full disclosure for everyone when they're participating. Now we have a situation where it looks to me like corporations own the public square. So the common sense solution to this is to provide some degree of limitation. You know, I don't know how many of you remember the last election cycle. I mean, everybody I know was trying to turn the TV off, the radio off, that they were just so bombarded. They'd go to the mailbox, there'd be a stack of cards in there like this. What I would submit to you is that there was so much free speech that some people's speech was able to drown out other people's speech. And isn't it part of our process to suggest that we all have a right to the public square, and not just to yell at the top of our lungs there, because if you have more money, you can amplify much greater than everyone else, that we have some opportunity to be heard. And that's the point that I think needs to be made, is that there is a reason that we're talking about this. I don't feel good about the fact that in Wisconsin, that we own the first and second most expensive state senate races in the history of this country. $10.1 million in the seat held by Alberta Darling, and $7.2 million in the seat held by Luther Olson. I would submit, when we get to that level of money, or in California, that at some point we have drowned out the free speech rights of many people. And, you know, I would point out that this is not a Republican or a Democratic pitch, but it's one that says, what do we have in common, and what kind of a process do we want to govern ourselves in this representative democracy?
Okay, thank you, Senator. Do we have another question? I saw a lot of hands up. Yeah, sure. How about right there?
I guess for me the question is, how do we overturn Citizens United? I mean, the best line I've heard about, you know, if corporations are people, I'll believe it when Texas executes one. You know, corporations are a fiction. And, you know, who is the corporation? The employees, the board, the people who buy the stuff that's produced? No, it's the CEO. And we have now this absolutely awful economic inequality where 85 billionaires have a wealth that totals 1.7 billion, and the rest at the bottom, it's 3.5 billion people that are totally unheard. So I want to know how we overturn Citizens United.
Let me jump in real quick. Another one was, I'll believe a corporation is usually one that has to undergo a colonoscopy. But the point is well taken. The simplest would be the United States Supreme Court to reverse the decision. It's now 5-4. They broke 3 precedents in overturning it. It would take the switch of a single vote to, and by the way, the majority decision is already written that's overturned. They'll just take Justice Stevens' dissent in Citizens United, and that would become a powerful majority decision. So that's the easiest way. The much more difficult way, of course, and that has begun to be undertaken, is to amend the Constitution. But you know, that is a long process, and that's not a battle for the faint of heart. That's going to take, like so many of the other battles that we fight in this country, whether it's civil rights or rights for women or even campaign finance reform. It's going to take years and years. Or redistricting reform. And you have to be in this for the long haul. So there's no easy solution. There really isn't. But the simplest would be overturned.
Any other thoughts on a solution or a non-solution?
Just a big one. The Constitution doesn't even talk about speakers, who speak. It talks about speech. It doesn't care who's speaking. And I said the Capital Times is a corporation, but it speaks. The other mistake we make is thinking that corporations are monolithic. You've got Terry Kelly here in town, West Central, big contributor to Kathleen Falk. You know, George Soros. There's a lot of very liberal, wealthy, Steve Jobs. He counseled President Obama even before he died. He said, "Let me do your PR. You're doing a lousy job." Apple computer. So it's a misnomer to say that corporations are monolithic. There is diverse as Americans.
So you're saying that have equal voice to the cultural leaders of Sheldon Needleton? That's what you're saying?
I say for every one of those, there's a counterpart.
No, it's 9 to 1.
Right, because I can go toe-to-toe with David Cope and write a check with him.
Or Scott Walker will take my call if I'm not a big Coke runner. He won't take my call.
And Sheldon Needleton will write my super PAC when I run for president.
I don't know if I'm saying that for every conservative millionaire and billionaire, there's a liberal.
Yeah, but we want to be fair for both. It doesn't matter that there's those on both sides. Make it that way for the whole thing. It's the problem on top.
Okay, Professor, you wanted to add something to on this issue of citizens?
There was a lot of fear right after Citizens United that every corporation was going to start dumping tons of money. And what's been interesting is that some have and some haven't. And the publicly traded corporations, especially in consumer markets, generally haven't. They've been sort of scared off at pissing off this part of their customer base or that part. It's been like the Koch brothers, and privately held companies or companies that they're doing something behind the scenes.
But they will provide dark money through blanket orders.
Yeah, there's other ways.
Groups with names like "We Love Wisconsin" or "I'm Your Friend." So that's what I'm saying is that's where a lot of the corporate and union money goes because they don't want it. They don't want you to know.
And I would add there's one other kind of end run away around this. It doesn't defeat or negate that money, but to have, like in Maine, in Vermont, the voluntary campaign limitations. So the Supreme Court says you cannot limit overall spending, but you can create a voluntary public fund incentive system where if you agree to spend up to a certain amount and then not go beyond that, you will. And you often have to raise a little bit of seed money, then you can use the public fund, and that's kind of a way to stay constitutional, but to limit spending.
We had that in Wisconsin for 1 year, by the way, for the Supreme Court.
Senator, if you want to.
I've watched with great interest in the media recently as billionaires have mused with the idea that the more you have in our political process, you have to do with how many dollars that you pay in taxes. You pay $1 in taxes, if you get one vote, if you pay 300 million, you get 300 million votes. You know, to me it doesn't matter whether they're more Republican or Democrat billionaires. What I worry about is becoming the kind of representative democracy that Russia is. An oligarchy where a couple of dozen billionaires buy the political process. Is that really the world we want to live in? Especially when they don't even have to disclose how they're spending their money. And as we pointed out here, lots of it are not direct campaign contributions. Right now, we have a process where it's estimated about 85% of the money in elections isn't even controlled by the candidates. Now, I'm not here to tell you that this is my election or Fred's election. It's your election. but isn't it a little bit difficult for us to even tell you what we're going to do in a world where so much money is from someplace else, even our speech gets drowned out? That's not good.
Candidates and the voters are spectators in their own elections.
So Dave, why is your vision so much different than this? I mean, what do you see happening? I mean, you say, okay, well, let's
Regulation.
do it too, but
We've
it's
been
still a
regulating
small
it.
number of people, isn't it?
We've been, I don't know, but we've been regulating intensely here. Look what's happening in Wisconsin right now. We have law enforcement, we have police with guns, banging on doors, pre-dawn raids on residences, seizing computers, seizing hard drives, seizing files, because they suspect that there might be, and these are all secret proceedings. In secret. You talk about Russia? Where are you, Fred, on this? Scott. On this.
How about the money?
No, but I'm talking about coordination. So supposedly there's coordination between Club for Growth and, let's say, the Walker campaign. Here's coordination. So I'm Club for Growth, and I call Governor Walker, which anyone can do, and say, what is he going to be in Wausau tomorrow? Because I got a function, or let's say next Saturday. So I got a function there. We want to put on a function, Club for Growth. No, he's not, but you might want to call a campaign. I call a campaign, I said, is Scott Walker going to be in Wausau? Because we don't want to, compete with the limited media in Wausau. We got to know that he's not there. He won't be there. That's collusion. That's coordination. That is, and this is why they're busting down doors. Now, I have to ask you, I understand rules are rules are rules. I understand that if you drop a third strike in baseball, you get to run first base. I still don't understand why. So rules are rules are rules. But is this proportionate to the evil? Somehow, in this country, Barack Obama got elected. Somehow, in this state, Senator Tammy Baldwin got elected. We have, and I want to also point out, money does not necessarily win. We've seen so many examples of money being defeated because people are throwing away the stuff. They're throwing it out the door. They're self-selecting their own information. Anyway, so I hope that answers the question. If it doesn't, I'm sorry.
Let's go to some more hands. How about this gentleman here? Do we have the microphone, or maybe we can hear him? Just a minute, here it comes. I put mine aside because I think it was causing that nasty sound. There you go.
My question is, actually it's a piece of advice to Mr. Blaska. I would suggest you read the autobiography of Robert Marion McFarland. And when he was governor, he had a machine, a legitimate machine, and his biggest problem was maybe some farmer wanted to vote for Bob. So the banker calls him and says, well, if you vote for that bill, we're going to call in your mortgage. In those days, you could call in a mortgage like this. And that's why we have had strict regulation. We needed it, just like we need it now.
I just would point out that Mr. LaValle got elected despite that, didn't he?
Andrew, did you want to say it, or? No, okay, let's go to another, that was kind of a comment and a fine one. Let's go to another person, sure, right here's fine. Actually, while you're up there, why don't you go to the gentleman in the green shirt? I'll try to be more efficient. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question about two bills that are available for scheduling in the Senate. I wonder if we could ask the senators if they could give their thoughts on it. One is the one that Andrea mentioned, AB 54, to restrict the hours for early voting. And this has received a lot of publicity. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel just had a strong editorial against it last week. It's available for scheduling in the Senate. There's another one, though, that has received almost no publicity as far as I can see, that I think would have a big effect on our voter registration system. Since about 1975, people have been able to register to vote by filling out a form during open registration period without showing proof of residence. This bill would end that practice, and everyone would have to show proof of residence. For a lot of us, that's not a problem, but for many people, if you're a student, if you don't have utility bills in your name, if you moved recently, it would be difficult. It's authored by Senator Grothman, and that's also available for scheduling in the Senate. That's SB 459.
Andrea, want to say something? And then let's see what the senators are on the bill or not.
Okay. AB 54, as Paul claim would ban weekend and evening hours for early voting at the clerk's office. We believe that this bill, what the authors say is that it treats all municipalities equally. They have to have, you know, it puts a cap on the number of voting hours you can have, early voting hours. But you have to know that, for one thing, not everybody lives by the same schedule that they live by in perhaps a small community. And already a 2011 bill law said that you can only have one early voting site per municipality. So you've got one early voting site in a small town where there may be 200 voters, and you've got one early voting site in Milwaukee which has 500,000 voters. And to limit the hours in that way is very hard on the election officials as well as the voters. And that leads to long hours. So by treating all municipalities equally, it does not treat all voters equally. That's AB 54. SB 459 would require all citizens to provide proof of residence whenever, however, they register to vote. It sounds simple, but it could have more of a suppressive effect than voter ID. Right now, if you register more than 20 days before the election, it's in the open registration period, and you fill out the form and you put your address, and the clerk you don't have to show proof of residence. And the clerk will check your residence, will confirm it by sending a first-class postcard. And if the postcard isn't returned as undeliverable, then that's a valid address. And that's really important for students. It's important for anybody who's living with somebody else at a particular time who doesn't have a bank statement or a residential lease or a utility bill with their own name and their own address on it. And that's a lot of people. This bill could be very, very bad.
Senators, are you for or against that?
Let me discuss just briefly the process. By April 1st, the legislature will be adjourned for the rest of this year. Any bill not acted on by April 1st is adversely disposed of and have to be reintroduced at the next session. That doesn't give us much time. The actual schedule is determined by the majority leader, and he and his group will determine what days we actually meet. He will actually determine what bills are scheduled and what bills are not scheduled. Now, bills you don't want scheduled, you hope he doesn't schedule. The bills you want acted on, you hope he does schedule. But the process is such that the majority leader in the Senate is the virtual dictator when it comes to scheduling and non-scheduling bills. I want to add one other thing. We've just been advised by him that we probably won't be meeting every day between now and the 1st of April. And the chances are there's probably less than 5-6 days left in the legislative session. So bills that you're not interested in passing hopefully will just be deferred and not acted on. And quite honestly, a Senate bill that hasn't been acted on yet has less chance of passing because it's got to go through the Senate and then the Assembly. AB bills mean they're Assembly bills, SB bills mean they're Senate bills. As far as the bills that you mentioned there, I would be opposed to both of them. But certainly we don't want to ban early voting. In my opinion, we should have more early voting. And when it comes to the other bill about registration. As far as I'm concerned, I think that registration, we ought to have same-day registration. We ought to make it easier rather than harder to vote.
And are you suggesting then that those are unlikely to pass, Fred?
Well, I'm saying that if they aren't scheduled in the next 5 scheduling, they won't pass.
Do you have any comment, Senator Schultz, on support or opposition to those?
Let me just begin by reflecting on 32 years. I've listened to many of my colleagues who have left the legislature, and inevitably when you chat with them, there comes a point when you ask, well, is there anything he ever did that you regret? one of my closest friends said, I voted for gambling, and it was a mistake. Well, fortunately, I didn't open up that Pandora's box, and I've been dealing with it ever since, and I'm not sure it's done any good for anybody other than the tribes. It certainly benefited them, and they certainly needed the help, but we have it, so we'll work with it. Vote, if I could take it back, probably would be on voter ID. Let me just tell you why I believe that. Because I think, like most people, think that we should have free and fair elections. That's where I was trying to get to with that, and I worked on it. And ultimately, when I thought I got it as good as I voted for it. Well, then if you know me, you know I love to be out there with my constituents and to listen to them. And it's sort of what's been a great attraction for me. After taking that vote, I held a lot of office hours around my district, not just on that bill, but on everything I was doing, and I was kind of stunned. I was stunned by the number of people who came up to me and they said, Dale, you generally do a real good job, but you got it wrong here. You got it wrong. And let me tell you why. And then they proceeded to give me all the different reasons why they were upset. Because I think, like most people, they feel like we should be making it easy for people to participate. The evidence of cheating and stealing of elections was largely a myth. And, after having discussed this for several years, we're still looking for this massive voter fraud. Now, I think most of us know there have been some examples, but hardly the amount that has been talked about. And so when I talk to my election officials, they'd say to me, Dale, we don't have a problem. It's not a problem. Trust me, you know me. And all you're doing here is putting a lot of needless expense on property taxpayers. You're driving me batty by constantly fiddling with our election laws. I wanted to make a difference, and I tried to do that, and oftentimes in the legislature, when you enter into a discussion, you wind up coming out the other end not exactly where you want. But let me just say that I'm proud to tell people that I'm from the party of Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, Dwight Eisenhower, and Ronald Reagan. Why did I identify the Dwight Eisenhower? Well, there are a lot of things about him that are worthy of emulating. He was a great leader at a time of great uncertainty. He certainly did more to build infrastructure in this country than probably any other president. It was a broad vision. But he was also a huge fan of extending the franchise to a lot of people and preached about the need to encourage people to vote. And I guess after listening to my constituents, I have to say that I think I get it. So in light with that, I think I'm going to be a no on both of these bills. It's not that they're not worthy of discussing. I think Fred and I have both been around long enough to know that sometimes you lend your name because you think they're important issues, but at the end of the day, you have to look at the product in front of you and vote. I think the people of this state want a break from massive bureaucratic regulation of our elections. So tonight I have found a place to find common ground.
All right, we have pretty similar time. Yeah, let's try this. If everybody's still with us here, I know this was advertised till 8, but we can go a little bit longer. Maybe try to just get a couple more questions.
Could I just throw in, I do have the figures for the actual voting fraud in Wisconsin. The Center study in 2004 found 7 substantiated cases of voter fraud out of 3 million votes. That's 2 10,000th of 1% votes. And Lorraine Minute, a Rutgers political science professor, found 31 voter fraud prosecutions in Wisconsin since 2008.
Is there an estimate of
And
how much?
most of those, I don't think those were impersonation. Anything
Those were
that would
felons
stop-
who didn't
Those
know
were
they were
felons. Sometimes
They didn't know they
thought they
couldn't.
were doing the right thing.
Okay, all right, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Most of the discussion has been about inside baseball, actually, between the Republicans and the Democrats. The Gallup poll in October indicated that 60% of the American public would like to see a strong third party. Now, my position is that our winner-take-all, single representative district type of elections results in two-party dominance. And you can see Dubois' law basically says that anytime you have winner-take-all, you get down to two major parties. So my question is, 60% of the people want a strong third party. What provisions are being considered out there that will actually reflect what the people want?
Who wants to take that one? You could say nationally, instant runoff voting is a way that we could enhance the chances of third parties without changing the Constitution.
And where is that? Is that Washington? Where is that?
Well, it's mostly at a municipal level right now. San Francisco has it.
There's a state that did it. Okay, am I wrong?
Well, Massachusetts, I think.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
not sure.
But essentially, it
Well, that's
defeats
national popular
it
vote.
defeats the spoiler effect where, oh, I want this person, but I can't waste my vote. So you get two votes. You get to prioritize your vote. And if your first choice doesn't win, your vote gets thrown to your second choice.
Is there anything else in Wisconsin? Is there any other way we could encourage third parties, be they to the right or the left of the current ones, or somewhere in the middle?
Well, one thing, when we used to have a public financing system in the state, we set the bar pretty high for third parties to qualify for public financing. The bill that Senator Schultz and Senator Risser voted for in 2006 that would have given us spending limits and a number of other things also lowered the threshold for third parties to qualify for public financing. Now, we don't have public financing in Wisconsin anymore, but the point is that there was some attempt made to try to make it easier for third parties to be a viable force. And, you know, in some elections, the 2002 gubernatorial race, there was a very viable third-party candidate, Ed Thompson, who ran on the Libertarian ticket. He got 12% of the vote, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, my guy, John Anderson, 7%.
Okay, we have a gentleman who's been waiting patiently. Go ahead.
Thanks. By the way, I appreciate the newspaper's involvement in a couple of these issues. Tell Tom Still, I really like his column too, that one yesterday was good. But my point is, competition that's been brought up, and my main question is how we really get people more involved in the process, because it seems like the more money you pour in, particularly off your elections, we don't get anywhere near the participation that we need. And as a result, the results we get aren't what they need to be. I'm thinking right now, Robin Voss, though, coming to this meeting tonight, the Assembly Majority Leader, Speaker, who made the comment that nobody cares about redistricting. That was an absolute statement that he made. At the same time, then talking about this tax rebate we're all going to get in the mail, or however it's going to come in a few weeks. And I haven't forgotten Senator Qualla and Scott Jensen, really. And back in those days, when we also they were sitting around a room for 3 months at a time, trying to decide how to give us our money back, and we all saw where that went. But how do we get people really interested in these issues? I think the newspapers certainly help, but people have got to get more involved in the process. Money isn't doing it, but what is going to turn people on so we could get a good voter turnout this year, and then maybe really make a good decision that we can all feel good about?
Go ahead, Dale, if you want. Looks like you were...
Okay. Well, listening to all this, and all I could think of was a quote that I can't remember the exact wording for, from Will Rogers, who used to scratch his head in the homespun way, mused that, any way you cut it, one party's worse than the other. Sometimes I wonder whether 3 would actually improve the situation, but it would definitely perhaps involve, have a chance of involving more people. It isn't necessarily true. I think that the serious answer to that question is that all of us have an ideal that what we think matters. I had a late brother who used to say he never voted because it just encouraged the bastards. He was a cynic because he didn't think that his opinion mattered, or that there was ever an opportunity for him to have his voice heard. And, getting back to my favorite topic here, it's part of the process. And when the process, whether it is a budget process, you saw what happened between the 2 Republican leaders this last week when Speaker Boston decided to skip the joint finance process where we normally try to work things out and to leverage the Senate to his will. The process matters. And if we don't all defend a fair and reasonable process and thoughtfully think about how we can improve it, I don't think we'll ever get people to participate. They will be cynical. And when we begin to suggest that speech is not intended to be somewhat equal so that everyone has a chance to be heard, then I think we're going to discourage people. I'm not against allowing people to use, means to make an impact. Whether you have the money to take off from your jobs, that you can run for office, you're advantaged over a young person who has to keep working, and we all can find differences. But when we get so extreme that we allow a very few people to create essentially, again, a Russian oligarchy where we buy the process and drown out everybody else's free speech rights, I would say the process is flawed.
I've got to say something about.
Go ahead, Fred.
I got to say something about third parties. I'm as I pointed out, fourth generation, fourth political party. And some people go, well, there hasn't been four political parties. Think back in your history. My dad was the last elected progressive third party in this county. He served 12 years as a senator. And we see that happen periodically, that someone runs as an independent or as a third-party person, and they maybe spoil the election. If you're going to have third parties, then I think you're going to change the election system. You can require a person to get 50% of the vote in the second have a runoff. There's other ways to go at it. Third parties are very, very difficult, of course, because people say, well, why should I vote when I vote doesn't count? They get worried about it. The problem with the progressive movement in Wisconsin, which my dad was very active in, was the fact that it worked out well for a while, but then on elections of presidents, they didn't have a candidate for president, so people wanted either Democrat or Republican, and forgot the third party. And so the national parties sort of took over for against the third party. Let me just make a couple suggestions on how to get people involved. And by the way, you're not going to get everyone involved. Everyone's not interested in sports. There's no way you're going to talk some people into getting involved in sports. But there's no way you're going to get everyone involved in politics, so it's ideal. I think, quite frankly, that the voters pamphlet idea, which I mentioned, is used in Oregon and some states where they send out voter pamphlets, and every voter gets from the pamphlet, which every candidate has a chance to put his page in, his picture in, and his policy in. I think that full disclosure is absolutely necessary. And I think that, I've always wondered why we didn't have TV channels, our public channels, which are given to private industry. It's no reason why there shouldn't be some, I think, free TV time for various candidates, give them a chance to participate. But the bottom line is organizations such as Common Cause, groups such as this, we get out and talk about it, and then go back and talk to our friends about it, and have our friends talk to our friends about it. And get those people who try to make them interested and get them involved.
I think Jay's asking that we give just a final comment from each panelist. And we really, I'm sorry I didn't get to more of the questions.
Come afterwards.
Write in a letter to the editor, and I'll get your question or comment in paper and online and digitally. Let's give everybody just sort of a last, here's what I want to leave you with.
I'll end it.
Okay.
Maybe we just go to Senator Risser, brief 1 minute summary. Well, as I say, we have a representative democracy. To make representative democracy work, we've got to elect good representatives. To elect good representatives, we've got to have an informed and involved constituency. And that informed and involved constituency must be given the tools by which they can know their position. I think the best thing we can do is talk it up amongst our friends and try and encourage people to get involved.
Well, I would just only say that I do worry about government regulators deciding who can speak, how much they can speak, and what they can say. And regardless of how you cut it, you know, we actually have more regulations, or at least we did until a couple of years ago, more regulations on speech, and yet, especially post-Watergate, when I think it looks like common cause reform. The more we regulate, the worse it gets. And I mean, I'm convinced of that. I still, we can disregard, we know nonsense when we can smell. I grew up on a farm, and so you can smell BS when you smell it. So I still have faith and trust in the people. And by the way, I think Senator Risser, you probably remember Bob Ewing. He was a Republican from the west side of Madison. I do very well. Not, you know, within my lifetime too. So political allegiances change.
Professor? Of all the issues that we're talking about tonight, they're all critically important. Voter ID and kind of voter suppression laws bother me personally the most, in that they seem to be, there's a deep, deep destructive cynicism behind it. And they're messing with a truly fundamental right. And Wisconsin is so much to be proud of in its first, second, or third, every single election ranking and voter turnout. And that is really at stake here. And the judge, Reagan appointee, conservative Judge Richard Posner, who was on the majority that decided that the Indiana law, which Wisconsin is based on, was okay, and the Supreme Court agreed with that. He has since changed his mind, and he said it was a bad mistake. And the reason why is he said, I decided it conceptually, you know, it seems okay, but now I know the real effect of these things. I know, A, that voter fraud charges are largely ridiculous and non-existent, and B, that it really is harming people's access to the polls. It has, this whole class of people have real world problems in getting to the polls. And he said if it came up again, he would vote for it.
Okay, Andrea?
Yeah, I just want to mention that the League of Women Voters does have information about the candidates. We have our candidates' answers on the LWV Dane County website for the spring elections, and we will be participating again with Isthmus, and also we'll have them on vote411.org for the fall candidates for statewide offices and legislative seats. Dane County League does a wonderful job of interviewing candidates, and those interviews are on the city channel. So do watch those, and then as Senator Risser says, be sure to talk with other people about why you're voting and why you feel the way you do. I think we too often because we're so polarized, we don't talk to each other.
Senator Schultz?
Well, let me just say that I'm with that growing group of people who think multitasking is not working. It's better to focus. And my plea for you here tonight is to join those of us who have felt that the best place we can make a difference in the process is redistricting. How can you help? Well, you can write letters to the editor, you can talk it up, you can get me or Senator Cohen invited to a group to talk about this issue. You can contact your friends on the internet. There are a whole host of ways where motivated, effective, small group of people can bring about change. You know, I have 10.5 months left in my term. I intend to be a strong voice for the things I believe in, and I won't be distracted by having to worry about an election. And I think this is an issue, hopefully, that we'll win and it won't be part of the election. But my friend, if it is, I'm counting on the State Journal and all the other newspapers in the state that have taken up the cudgel to make this a factor in their endorsement decisions. And I truly appreciate not only the State Journal and your effort, but all of the newspapers in the state who have recognized that this is a fundamentally important thing. It means a great deal to me personally and a lot of people.
Thank you, Jay, and his group put this on, and we really appreciate that. I want to thank you, Jay, and I'll give you the last word.
Thank you, Scott, and to the State Journal. Thank you very much, Edgewood College. And thank you, panelists, all of you. I really appreciate all of you being here. We had a civil discussion. This is the way it should be done. I want to end by telling you that I'm actually, in my 18 years at Common Cause, long time, I'm actually more excited and positive than I've ever been about the chances for political reform in this state. In part, it's because of the turnout at events like this. We had 300 people in Stevens Point not long ago. A lot of people were very mad that they were moved without their permission from the 7th Congressional District to the 3rd Congressional District. The issue, and I agree with Senator Schultz, Dale Schultz, I think I have not seen an issue capture the public imagination around Wisconsin like redistricting reform. The other issues are all vitally important. But this issue, I think, resonates with so many citizens because they really do understand that they didn't have a say at all in who they had choices with at election time, general election time. And I think most of the people in Wisconsin are very sad about what's happened in the state, the polarized politics. And most people understand that there's something about a competitive election, a choice at election time, that makes your elected representative more responsive to you, more responsive to the wishes of their constituents, and doesn't necessarily shut out the minority view, the view if you're in a Democratic district that they don't have to listen to Republicans and vice versa. So there's something positive, and I am very optimistic that this will become a political issue, which often doesn't happen in general elections. This will become an election issue. And I think that's incumbent upon a lot of you going out. And when you do ask your candidates for public office what they think about the environment or property taxes or education or all the other issues that concern you, you also ask them, where are you on redistricting reform? Where are you on some of these other political reforms? That's how we'll get change in Wisconsin. When elected representatives start hearing from their constituents that it matters, and it matters because of the way that they're going to vote at election time. So I thank you for coming out. I hope you'll stay involved. I hope you will stay afterwards and talk to us if you'd like to do that, and go out and do something with this information and have a safe ride home. Thank you. Good night.